Retroid is back with their latest entry into the retro handheld market, the Retroid Pocket 3. It's their follow-up to their last product, the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. The 2 Plus packed a ton of features into a tiny pocketable device, and now Retroid is back to do it again in a new form factor. So join me in this video as we'll take a look at the Retroid Pocket 3's hardware, software, and retro gaming performance. So get subscribed and let's dive right in. Okay, so first we should actually talk about some potential issues with this device. According to YouTuber Taki Udan, who's heavily involved in many of the testing of these retro handheld emulation devices, even before they make it into the hands of the public, has called out some major concerns with the release of the Retroid Pocket 3. It seems to all start with the fact that they've been sitting in a warehouse for pretty much a full year because of major quality control issues. Some of the issues that Taki has spoken out about include the flickering of the display at lower brightnesses or significant app crashes. While I have not experienced any of these issues myself, it's hard to say if that's going to happen to me after this review, but at this point, my device is overall working really well after over 80 hours of use. So now getting to the unboxing. Unpacking the box, I was surprised to find that before I even got to the device itself, there were PCBs for the ABXY and D-pad at the top, along with a 32GB micro SD card. It's a bit strange that they included an additional set of PCBs for different button styles, but I guess it's good to see that if somebody really wants to tinker with this device, they could. Underneath the spare parts is the Retroid Pocket 3 box. It's actually really well designed, and it even feels like packaging you might find at a brick-and-mortar store. Opening up the box is the device wrapped with a screen protector, an instruction manual, and a USB-C charging cable. I opted for the yellow color, which is listed as orange on their site, or maybe I'm just colorblind, but you can also pick up the device in black, Super Nintendo style, DMG Game Boy style, white, and indigo. All of the renderings look super nice online. And the color of this yellow device is no exception. It's got a unique, friendly feeling color, and it feels very Nintendo inspired, which I quite like. The Retroid Pocket 3 has two different models available. Both have the exact same specs, except for $119 you can get the 2GB RAM model, or for $129 you can get the one that includes 3GB of RAM. Both models have 32GB of internal storage and a microSD card slot for expandable storage. The Retroid Pocket 3 introduces a new design language for the device, a 4.7-inch 16:9 touchscreen with the D-pad at the top and the analog sticks at the bottom. The screen has super thin bezels and a very subtle Retroid logo. This is one of the best looking budget emulation handhelds I've seen so far. Looking at the Retroid Pocket 3, I can't help but think it looks just like a Switch Lite Mini or something like that. Comparing it to the Nintendo Switch, it's basically the width of the Switch tablet without the Joy-Cons. Next to a Switch Lite, it's the width of the Switch Lite itself minus one of the controller sides, and it's also a little bit shorter. Like I said, it's like the perfect Switch Lite mini size. It even could fit in your pocket. Despite the device coming with the option to swap out the buttons, I actually quite like the ones that it comes with by default. The ABXY buttons are clicky, but still have some travel to them, so they feel good to press down on. I do wish the ABXY buttons were a little bit larger because they are a little small, but they still feel good otherwise. The D-pad is the Vita-style D-pad, which feels good in all directions. Retroid has also finally ditched their slider analog stick and went with two full-range analog sticks. The front of the device looks very sleek, but it wasn't until I held the device in my hand that I realized that a few important things appeared to be missing: the Start Select buttons and a home button of some sort considering this runs Android. Well, that's because the Start Select buttons are actually found at the top of the device opposite of the power button. While we're on the top of the device, the L1, L2, R1, R2 shoulder buttons all feel really good. They're nice and clicky from all areas of the buttons, and it doesn't feel like there are any dead zones. You can find the home button on the right side of the device with volume buttons on the left side of the device. This does take quite some getting used to, and even after many hours of using this device, I still can't quite say that I'm used to this layout. I did find that the start button is actually surprisingly convenient to reach for, but quickly adjusting the volume requires you to move your entire hand to hit the buttons, and I always need to think about where the actual location of the home button is. One last really small detail that I liked about the design of this device is the SD card slot. I find it unusual that most brand name devices like Nintendo, you put your microSD card into the device with the label face up, but almost every single emulation handheld that I've used, you put the microSD card upside down. Retroid Pocket's microSD card slot is finally in the correct direction. You place your microSD card label up. Yes, this is a very small detail, but it's such a pleasing aspect of this device, and I think it really speaks to the quality of this retro handheld. The Retroid Pocket 3 comes pre-installed with Android 11 and even includes access to the Google Play Store out of the box. Turning the device on for the first time, you're taken through the device wizard made by Retroid. It helps you set up the standard stuff for the first time like time zone and Wi-Fi, but it also has a step to have a selection of emulators and other retro gaming apps installed by default. While you can download most of these apps from the Google Play Store, it's great that Retroid takes the extra step to get them installed automatically if you choose to. One of the standout features on this Android build is the inclusion of Retroid's custom launcher, aptly named Retroid Launcher. I am usually not a fan of included launchers, but the simplicity, lightweight nature, and integration of this one makes it stand out as one of the best. It's not feature-rich, but I think that's okay. It's focused on presenting you a list of your retro games and getting you into those games as quick as possible, and that's the way it should be. It's also nice to see that there is some level of customization within the app as well. For example, for systems that support playing games through RetroArch, you can actually completely customize the core the system defaults to. It's a little bit of effort and you have to go through the effort of actually getting the exact name of the RetroArch core, but I really appreciate that this is even an option. After you get your emulator set up the way you like each one, I recommend putting your microSD card into the Retroid Pocket and making sure that you choose to format the card for portable storage. From there, even if you don't necessarily plan to use the Retroid Launcher, you should open up the Retroid Launcher, switch to emulation, choose Setup, create ROM folders, and select Default SD Card Directory. This will create the folder structure the launcher expects, which will make setup a little bit easier for you. When you put the microSD card into your computer and load it with games, you will notice that there is a folder at the root of the SD card named Retroid Pocket Games. It has predefined folders for your BIOS, and in ROMs there are individual folders for each system. When you select the systems you want to show up in the launcher, you will need to go into each system, choose ROMs, and now you can quickly select Default SD Card Directory instead of navigating to a custom folder for every single system. You will also need to remember to hit Scan after you've added those directories. You can only have it scan a few directories at a time, but if your collection isn't massive, this won't take very long at all. Getting into actual gameplay, if you're familiar with the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, you can expect just about the same performance. The exception I would say really comes from the vibrant 16:9 screen. It makes games look super crisp and super vibrant. And it's not to say that the Retroid Pocket 2's screen was bad, but it is nothing compared to the Retroid Pocket 3. While most systems that perform best on this device are great for a 4:3 aspect ratio screen, we now have the added benefit of using widescreen hacks on a lot of these systems. Starting with Dreamcast, the Redream emulator coupled with widescreen cheats works really well. Crazy Taxi 2 plays at full speed, so you can enjoy the soundtrack for the game without any audio glitches at all. For Super Nintendo, I was able to get Super Mario World with widescreen patches to run at nearly full speed. It averages around 56 frames per second, but I personally couldn't tell the difference. It had very smooth gameplay for me. And while it can be glitchy at times, I also really enjoyed Genesis in widescreen as well. PlayStation 1 in widescreen is probably the most seamless system to apply these widescreen hacks to, and most games I've found do play well even upscaling to 2x. Nintendo 64 was the only system with widescreen hacks available that I was not able to get running well enough to consider it playable. There are either strange artifacts, or the resolution is so low it's not really worth it. On the other hand, N64 without any widescreen hacks really does run great. There are of course the standard games that are harder to emulate, like Mario Tennis. Speed-wise, this game is actually perfectly playable, but there are still visual glitches that definitely take away from the experience overall. Reaching the upper limits of the Retroid Pocket 3 is PSP. I actually had a ton of fun with PSP on this device. Nearly all of the games that I tried to play on PSP were able to easily upscale to 2x resolution. This kind of makes the Retroid Pocket 3 a perfect PSP HD. There is of course the standout harder to emulate game, God of War. This game is not playable out of the box, but I do think a decent amount of PSP games will play very well on the Retroid Pocket 3. Game Boy Advance was a great experience on the Retroid Pocket 3. There are still pillar box bezels, but they aren't too large, and the quality of this screen really helps to blend the empty space with the physical bezels of the device. While the Retroid Pocket 3 does come with the option to install a few different GameCube emulators, unfortunately I had no luck with Dolphin, Dolphin Developer, Dolphin MMJR, or Dolphin MMJR2. All ran too slow or reducing the resolution to the point where it's just a blur and it's still not fast enough to be playable. Because of this, I had pretty much no expectations for PlayStation 2 to be playable, but to my surprise, with all hacks turned on, Simpsons Road Rage was pretty much completely playable. It did have a few stutters, but it actually seemed to work pretty great. The performance of Simpsons Road Rage got my hopes up, so I actually also tried Tony Hawk Underground, but as you may have guessed, it barely ran at 50% speed. You may find a game here or there that you can get up and running, but my guess is that there will only be a handful of playable PS2 games. Nintendo DS has great performance, and I was able to upscale the device to the high-resolution graphics. That did get my hopes up that I would be able to get 3DS running, but unfortunately, that didn't run very well. With hacks and reduced resolution, I was still not able to get Super Mario 3D World able to run at even half speed. For Android gaming and game streaming, Game Pass worked fairly well once you change your settings to reflect an Xbox-style controller. It isn't the highest quality, but for something casual like Power Wash Simulator, I think it does pretty well on the Retroid Pocket 3. I also tried out Pokemon Unite with the button mapping software, and that was also a ton of fun as well. Grand Theft Auto San Andreas for Android has built-in controller support, so this works completely out of the box and performance felt nice and smooth. Lastly, we'll take a look at the HDMI Out functionality. The Retroid Pocket 3 has an HDMI Out supporting 720p. With a Bluetooth controller, this may be a decent dockable emulation handheld. The device scales to a TV properly, but maxes out at 720p, which means it won't look great on larger TVs. But for retro games, it's probably good enough. All in all, the Retroid Pocket 3 brings quite a lot to the table, making it a truly great budget device. It's got a great design, it's super thin, and with the exception of some button placement, it's got great ergonomics. By far, the best feature on this device is its screen. It's nice and vibrant, and truly impressive how bright it can get, and conversely, how dim it can get for some late night gaming without destroying your eyes. My only slight hesitation to fully recommending the Retroid Pocket 3 is knowing that there could be some quality control issues according to YouTuber Taki Udon, but my experience with this device has been nothing but positive. Retroid is definitely making meaningful improvements to their devices, and it's clear that they are thinking of their customers when they release this new hardware. What do you think? Is the Retroid Pocket 3 worth an upgrade? Are you picking one up? Let me know down in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss future videos, and thanks for watching.